love, love, oh, till I hear the breath of the Spirit flowing in me.
Hello, welcome to Spirit of Life. My name is Geraldine Lee, your host, and our guest is Michael Ballek. He's a life coach and a social worker. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Geraldine.
Yes, it'll be great to hear about your faith story and how you came to your strong faith in God.
Well, I think faith is a journey and it is a story, and for me that's been the case. Whether it's strong, at times it has been and times it hasn't been. I grew up in a Catholic family in Ashburton, and I went, I'd say probably, I have been going to church most of my life, and there were times when, through that I was very strong with it. I was, as a young person, as a teenager, I was looking forward to becoming a priest.
Wow.
And went and studied in seminary for several years just after leaving school. And then came out from that. I sort of thought that it wasn't for me, I wasn't feeling happy there. And I think I came to a conclusion reading, I used to read a lot of books in the seminary, and one of the books I read was called Lust for Life, which was about Vincent van Gogh. And, he had a very turbulent life, as you'd know, and as an artist and as a thinker, really. He was quite a, very deep thinking sort of person, and he had a lot of sort of unhappiness and a lot of happiness in his life. And I remember just reading that book. This was when I was in the seminary, and I was thinking, well, for him to be seeking that colour, that joy, that engagement, that's what he thought was important, and I wasn't noticing that in me. So I felt, and God wouldn't want me to be, living that level where I'm feeling unhappy and not engaged, not in charge. So, and I was feeling I was doing it all for other people in a sense. So that's when I decided to. I really look at God as not as a boss or as an employer, but as someone who was really encouraging me to be my best. And so that's been the sort of, I suppose, vision I've had of God through my life. And there's been times when that sort of waxed and waned a bit. When I left the seminary, I went to university in Adelaide and then studied social work there. And that's when I had a few interesting moments there. As once when I was in a park, actually, I remember being out one night in a little park when there was a playground there, yes. and this must have been a time when I was feeling quite disconnected from God and feeling quite, I suppose, the feeling that I really wanted to pull away and that I wanted to make my own life. And so I remember going out into a park one night, and it was cool sort of evening, no one else around, and I remember just yelling out at God and abusing and using all sorts of swear words and and just really having like a spray in the way that you would against someone that you were quite sort of angry with or needed to cut away from. I needed to prove myself in some way, because I was in my mid-20s at that stage, but probably quite young in terms of where I was in the level of maturity. And so it took me a while to then, really find myself through my 20s and 30s, and then, coming back to being involved with God and then seeing how, Jesus was walking with me through those times, through the dark times, a lot of loneliness and a lot of, feeling that I was working very hard for other people but not getting that sense of nourishment myself. And that's been sort of a big theme for me, and that thing, well, what am I sort of settling for, and how am I living? So it's always having to keep in mind that God's carrying me through those times.
Yeah, it's powerful, and you have a good vision of God being a friend and someone that loves you.
Yeah, and I think that's been the best way for me to keep the relationship going. And as I've become, older now, and I came back from Adelaide back to Melbourne and have studied things like social work and coaching, and then moved into the professional helping work, and just that sense of then having God as a support for me has been really powerful, and in a way that it allows me then to connect with other people, because I can see that God's connected with us.
Yeah, excellent. And has there been like the Bible or someone who's spoken into your life that has helped you in that image of God?
Probably not a person, I would say. Probably through books that I've read and have shown me different ways of relating to the faith journey. Like I'm quite a theoretical, abstract person, so a book that's touched me has been Henry Nouwen's Compassion, and just that view of Jesus. I remember reading and talking about compassion and connection, and him really feeling the pains and the sufferings we have. So something about the human experience of Jesus as reflected in people has been really attractive to me.
Yeah, so that's Henry Nouwen.
Henry Nouwen, yeah.
He was a priest, wasn't he?
He was a priest, yeah, and then through a bit of a searcher and but he wrote very, very powerfully about the. I suppose there's a phrase in one of his books about Jesus being affected to the guts, to the core of his being with compassion, and that's sort of allowed me to feel at times that I can then, if I'm with somebody, I can sort of step into the fire a bit with them, and that it'll be okay, that Jesus has done that.
Yes, that's a powerful image of Jesus on the cross, the way that gives me, as you talk, it gives me the image of the contortion Jesus has on the cross, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, and we often feel those times in the Bible when Jesus is contorted with rage, like in the temple, and so that very, it takes it out of the realms of, Jesus being this removed figure, or about faith being that, but about he is someone who's walked alongside, can walk with us because he's gone through those very human contortions, in a sense. Yes. I like that.
That's a powerful image, Michael. On that note, we need to go for a break. You've been watching Spirit of Life. We'll be back after the break. Hello, welcome back to Spirit of Life. My name is Geraldine Lee, your host, and our guest is Michael Ballek. He's been sharing about his faith journey. Hi, Michael. Welcome back. You were sharing very powerfully about that image of Jesus on the cross. Most people would like to see, perhaps today, about Jesus being successful and being joyful, and that seems to be where our society is going. What drew you, though, to that image of suffering?
Well, I think suffering is, one of the main elements of life, and joy is there as well, and I think that's really important, because the elements of joy and positivity are there with Jesus, but he was a human person, and suffering is part of humanity, and I think what it does, it allows us to appreciate both the value of life and also to value those times of joy and times of ecstasy when we have them. I think, Jesus, well, the image of Jesus on the cross is one of the fundamental things, and as has been really emphasised in movies recently about, they've been very graphic, like Mel Gibson's The Passion, and ones that the real human, the pain of Jesus on the cross, you can really feel, and you can really see the nails going in and things like that. And because I think they've been really emphasising us with our struggles and connecting that with God. And as I was saying before in that book of Compassion, where Jesus probably can be with us in success because he has been through the suffering, and that's it's not for us to feel that suffering really has to be avoided or wiped out all the time. It is there, and we're going to all feel it from time to time, and no one's completely positive and happy all of the time. And if we were, we'd probably feel we were missing out on one of the elements of life.
Yes.
So I suppose suffering by Jesus experiencing it has shown us that it's okay to have it as well.
Yes, I suppose there's an emphasis on the resurrection, you know, and some Christian faiths focus a lot on the resurrection and try to avoid the suffering side, you know, and say, oh, with Jesus you're going to have all this, you're going to have success, everything's going to be fine. But what you're saying is you have both the suffering and the resurrection.
Well, I think the suffering comes after the resurrection as well, and the resurrection gives us then empowerment or strength to go back into suffering and to come out, because we know that there is going to be, you know, resurrection and change. From moments of being deeply down in a trough, you can experience that and then come through a resurrection yourself in a sense.
That's great. Yes, because I think our society is very much into feeling secure, and faith means that we will feel some insecurity. It's inevitable, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a good way of putting it. It's like a trust in being a bit insecure sometimes, and knowing that we'll be okay if we are a bit insecure. We don't have to then be totally in control all the time, because that's an enormous pressure to feel that we've got to know exactly what we're doing. And so that if we don't feel that, we can then feel like we're a failure, or we feel that we're not being, you know, the sort of person that we should be. So, and part of, you know, coaching is about that. It's about recognising what's the reality of a person at the time, because there's things about our life that we can change, and there's things that we can't change. And we can't change where we're from, or what we look like to an extent, or who our family is, and even the feelings and emotions we have. And they're given us for a reason. I think part of, you know, in a way that's part of the gift of God, is He has given us our past and our sufferings and our joys. You know, in the way Vatican II says, the Gaudium et Spes, the joy and the hope, the sufferings of life are important. And I think too, that's what's, in terms of faith, that's one of the things that I find, you know, attractive about the Catholic faith, is there is that real embrace of suffering as part of the human story. And that's present in all through the history of the Church and the current experience.
Yes. And so you, at that point at 25, that seemed to really comfort you during that time when you realised the suffering and the joys.
Yeah, and I think it allowed me to go through, you know, a pretty sort of unhappy period, and knowing that it would be okay in the end. There's stories too of, you know, Mother Teresa and a lot of the other people who've gone through periods of great darkness, and Teresa of Avila and others who've gone through, you know, what they call, you know, dark nights of the soul, St. John of the Cross. And I remember too, I was working in a boys' home in South Melbourne, and I was reading St. John of the Cross at that time, and in that very way, in that very close way that Jesus, that St. John writes about Jesus' suffering and connection with that and the humanity, that really resonated with me at that time.
Yes. That's a great image, and it all, because you would have been seeing a lot of suffering amidst all the work you were doing.
Yeah, and also great joy as well. So it's about you know, looking at that, where that is, and holding that up as well as, and the hope as being there. Yes. Really important.
I suppose the faith keeps you strong, that, you know, there will be the joy that will come eventually.
Yeah, and sometimes even just stepping back a bit out of, if you're going through a dark period, to step back out and say, oh, this is this is what I'm going through at the moment. It's okay. I'll be all right. I can get some help with that, or I can manage it. That even just that action does give you that sense of perspective and allows you to think, yep, it does have a beginning or an end and an end point, and it's not my total life.
Yes, and it's good that you call it an action, because some people would say it's an attitude, but I suppose it's consciously making yourself think that that you can be positive, rather than just letting your feelings control you. Yeah,
and I think that's why we give an intellect, in a sense. It's to get some sense of perspective on our life, and to have that relationship, say, with our thoughts and with other people, that we can pull ourselves out of our own situation and say, well, you know, this is what God has gone through, what a lot of other people have gone through, and there's people who've gone through this before, and then there's help that I can get.
Yeah, no, that's very inspiring. On that note, we need to go for a break. You're watching Spirit of Life. Stay with us and we'll be back in a few minutes.
Blow till I hear but breath of the Spirit blowing in me. Blow, blow, blow till I hear but breath of the Spirit blowing in me.
Hello, welcome back to Spirit of Life. My name is Geraldine Lee, your host, and our guest is Michael Ballek. He's a social worker and life coach, and he's been sharing his faith journey. Hello, Michael. You've been talking a lot about suffering, and you've been able to really show the joys of suffering. How's that also helped you with your vocation or your work?
Well, yeah, I think joy and suffering are really two sides of the same thing, and I think with coaching and both social work, both of the aims of those areas is about helping people to, I suppose, become more of what they're wanting to be and what God's wanting them to be as well. So I think in my personal way, it's been having gone through those experiences and then seeing the joy, that's then allowed me to look at how I can be my best, how I can be more attentive to the emotions I'm going through and the suffering I'm going through, and to not get disconnected from that, and to then bring that to awareness of, you know, what's going on in my family and the people around me and the ones that I'm working with. And so for even when clients of who are going through difficult times, to then the inspiration has been that I can then connect with that, and me as another person can show that, you know, I have some sort of sense of not understanding, but a bit of empathy or connection with what they've gone through or what they're going through at the moment, because it's a human thing to be doing, and it's something that we all. So I think it's not about having to deny those feelings.
Yes, and can you remember like a time where you went through that suffering and joy, like some incident in your life?
Yeah, I think in a way sometimes I go through those in sessions with people. Like if I'm having a session with somebody and they're talking about something, feeling quite stuck or feeling quite, like I was having just a coaching session with a girl last week, and she was then talking about real conflict with her values and quite sort of feeling quite depressed in her job and in her feeling that she wasn't, you know, living the way she wanted to be, and that there was a lot of sort of stress in relation to other people at work, and that really brought me down, because it's just, you know, I can sort of feel that sense of angst as well. I've been there in situations where you can really feel like you're alone and you're having to really struggle to keep your values. But then out of that, then we were able to look at the fact that there are times, you know, of joy as well, or moments, not even so much joy, but things to appreciate within that there's times when she has been able to live her values and has been able to really be the type of person that she's wanting to be, even though there's pressures from other areas or that other people might not agree with that perspective, that she can be passionate about what she does, and that she can then find her connection with what she's doing. So that's quite a joyful thing for me, to be able to really help people to notice that. And it's the same process. It's sort of like awareness of one and awareness of the other. And I think in faith it's about always having that view and that awareness, because we do get, even say in the readings at Mass or readings or just to read the Bible, you have that great awareness of the pressures that people go through in our life. So there's those real low point stories, and there's the higher ones as well.
Yes, it sounds like you really enter the journey with the client. And
I think it is about seeing it as a journey that a person goes through, and that they're going to be okay by travelling through some of the darker spots, and that even just having a bit of a shift in attitude can sometimes be what makes the difference. and gets them through to the other side. And it's really, really lovely when, at the end of a session, someone will come and say, oh, that's great, I've got some hope then to carry on with things in a different way, or that's really shifted how I look at it. And that can be, it's not about having to remove from the suffering or to remove the difficult situation, but just to look at it in a different way.
Yeah, so, sometimes you hear professionals keeping a very distant to their clients, but it sounds like you enter the journey. So can that be quite draining at times?
It can be if you don't keep the awareness of the process, of having to keep that sense of perspective and also keep the hope coming in. Because sometimes if you do allow yourselves to go down to the point of wallowing with the person and getting stuck in that suffering, that can be draining. And I've had times, when I've come out of sessions and I felt, really completely drained. But one of the good things about coaching is that it always ends on a note of appreciation. So it's about looking for the change that's been made. In pretty much in every session you can see change being made, or you can, when people talk about their life, if you ask them what's happening, what are the strengths they've been using in a situation, what are the what's the new insights they've got from sometimes very difficult times, that can be a little step on which hope is built.
Yeah, that's great.
So it's about magnifying those things and putting them into practice, and then you can project into the future and say, well, what if you did this what if you took that awareness and then applied it to this situation? What difference would that make? So it's not about having to deny what they've got, but sometimes, or deny the suffering or the difficulties, but maybe just to reframe it and look at it in a bit of a different way.
Yeah, so you assist them to see the positive side of the story, the same story.
Yeah, and to see what power they can take to act in a situation.
Yeah.
And, thinking is an action. So having an attitude of, yep, that's been very tough, I've come through that, I've gained this strength from that, and I've gained this ability. Like that happened with me in my own coaching, when I've been coached by people, and I've had the sense of being able to say, well, yeah, I've been really struggling with how to speak to somebody about this, but I've then been able to say, yep, I can now realise that I'm actually doing a bit better than I thought I was. And then I can take that forward and put some things into practice.
Yeah, it's certainly a very inspiring thing to be able to see the positive in tragedy.
Yeah, it's a wonderful, it's a real privilege too. And I always see, I've always seen counselling and social work as a privilege to help, because you're actually with people in moments of fire sometimes.
Yes. Yeah, no, life coaching is wonderful, and your sharing has been wonderful for, in our program. We'd like to have you back.
That would be great.
You've been watching Spirit of Life. We'll be back next week. Goodbye and God bless you.
Bring it to birth and blow where you will. Blow